Hey everybody out there at Action Figure Land. I just wanted to continue with a theme that my last video highlighted, and that is uh, the use of vehicles that are scaled for the 3 3/4 inch G.I. Joe action figures from the 80s and 90s. And these vehicles are not made by Hasbro, and they aren't even necessarily intended to hold 3 3/4 inch figures, but they do. And if you become aware of them, you can incorporate them into your G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero 3 3/4 inch collections, and get access to vehicles that were not necessarily made or represented in that line. And so here we have a U.S. Army Jeep that is sort of like the Willys style U.S. Army Jeep from World War II, from that era. And of course, we've got Major Blood driving again, because he is being a Cobra member of Cobra, he is an adept car thief. So that's the only reason that I could see him driving a vintage U.S. Army Jeep. So he's up to no good. And the other figure, which is almost 3 3/4 inches tall, I do not know what his what line he came from. So if you know, write that in the comments. And so as we go here, I wanted to show off this vehicle. It's a two-seater, and it's got so automatically we see that it's pretty much on scale for 3 3/4 inch figures. It has the windscreen or windshield, depending upon what part of the world you're in, that retracts or folds down, which is common on these Jeeps. I would say that it's a very good 3 3/4 inch scale, except for the mounted 50 caliber machine gun in the back is a little bit, it's mounted too low for realistic, I guess, interpretations. That machine gun should probably be at least chest high if this vehicle was completely accurate. It looks like if he's going to swing that gun from side to side, he's going to hit Major Blood in the noggin. So we don't want that to happen, even though he is a bad guy. And I picked this vehicle up at a flea market a couple years ago, and I was under the impression that perhaps it was meant for, that it was part of the oh, there goes the Skull Man. I was under the impression that perhaps it was meant for the Remco Sergeant Rock figures that were based on DC Comics. And probably from the early 1980s, late 70s. But I've looked this vehicle over, and incidentally, while I'm doing that, I wanted to show you a neat, what I consider to be a neat feature. There's a little adjustable clip in the driver's seat that can hold the driver in. And I'm not even sure that old Hasbro has utilized that in any of their expensive vehicles from the 80s and 90s. So I thought that's kind of cool. But we'll put Major Blood to the side here. And so just kind of turn the Jeep around, and it's got sort of the extra gas tanks or gas cans that we see on these Jeeps a lot of times. And the 50 caliber machine gun swivels, so you can direct your fire. And when I flip this over, this is where I expected to see the Remco brand if this were a Sergeant Rock vehicle, but it's Zima number 897, made in Hong Kong, and it doesn't really give a year at all. And so anyway, so that's kind of that. So if you know what line of figures this came with, and I'm presuming it came with a line of figures, and you know what, it might not have. It just may have come as the vehicle. But it looks, I mean, with this seat clip, you would think it's definitely designed to hold some type of figure in. And of course, we know this is not a Hasbro item. We know it's not G.I. Joe, and it's not the core line of G.I. Joe knockoff figures either. And so the other feature that this Willys Jeep has is, you see these rubber, there is a band that goes around all four of the tires, rubber, because the rest of the tire is plastic, and that allows the Jeep to have enough friction, because when you roll it, and it might be hard on this bumpy surface, but if you hear that, that actually is the motor inside, which sounds pretty terrible and rough. But you know, there's got to be something you know, I think I'm actually discovering something here as I'm filming this video. If you're familiar with the 80s, there were several types of friction toys in the 80s that were vehicles. And there was a type that you could pull back, and as you pull back, you could feel the tension building, and when you released it, it would go forward based upon you basically cause tension by putting it in reverse, and then when you let it go, it would release the tension and move forward. Then there were a more sophisticated type of vehicle, and I think Tootsie Toy made these. I recall Tootsie Toy making them, and they were cars and trucks, and they had a little yellow button on the top, and you would do this number, and you could hear the engine revving up every time you moved them forward, or you revved it forward, and then you would sit it down, and you would hear the engine idling, so to speak, and you would press the little yellow button on the top, and then it would release the vehicle, and it would go forward. And the more times you did this number and charged the motor up, the faster the vehicle would go. Well, as I'm filming this, literally, this is the absolute truth, it dawned on me that even though this isn't made by Tootsie Toy, this 50 caliber machine gun has got like a spring, and so when I'm doing this, the wheels aren't moving, but you can see that it moves forward. I think, you know, with age, the motor inside has weakened, but that's what this is. This is you rev them up, and then you release it by pressing this gun down. But I just don't think that's functioning as strong as it did. Needless to say, though, if you're into 3 3/4 inch scale figures, you have the advantage that it is a particular scale that lends itself to well, gosh, we know Hasbro made tons of vehicles for their 80s and 90s G.I. Joes, and the scale of the figures lent themselves to making vehicles and play sets that were, well, some of them were huge in size, but if you take this guy up to the 6-inch scale, which is kind of the everyone's favorite scale now, your vehicles and your play sets are mostly impractical, and the companies don't make them because of just the size demands to keep it in scale. So it was an advantage. And then the other advantage is if you search thrift stores and other secondary type markets, you'll find that there are a lot of vehicles like this Jeep that will pass as well for the 3 3/4 inch figures that are pretty much in scale. So it's just interesting. It allows you to have vehicles and scenarios that the 1980s and 90s Hasbro was not going to make for science fiction type, for a science fiction type military line. And so here you go. You got a traditional item here, a more traditional vintage military item, and it is out there to be had. And so just check your thrift stores, and you'll get some unique pieces that you can incorporate into your G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero collections. And Major Blood is building up quite a motor pool of these types of off-brand vehicles, and you know that he's definitely up to no good. You all have a great weekend, and keep collecting. Stay tuned for more videos, and don't forget to like and subscribe.